Hello and welcome to today's deep dive on the Corona Warn app designed by SAP in Germany. My name is Ake Rudolf. I'm director of the UX Design Awards and head of strategy at International Design Center in Berlin, in short IDZ. We're the awards organizer. The IDZ is a leading German non-profit design institution. We are a professional association. We connect designers, design consultancies, and companies, and we have looking more than on 50 years of expertise. Our mission is to promote design as a driver of innovation in business and society. And here at the UX Design Awards, this is basically one of our main efforts to award and to promote the positive impact of great people-centric design worldwide. So the awards, of course, are judged by and handed out by expert jury panels twice per year. And the second of two participation calls this year is actually still open until the end of May. So if you're working on some great experience projects, maybe it's products, services, but even prototypes or visionary concepts, then make sure to take part, make it count, and visit our website for more information. There's still time to submit. We would be glad to welcome your work too in the competition for the best in experience design. In our virtual event series, such as tonight, we invite awarded designers and teams to talk about their work and to share knowledge with the awards professional community. With our events, we invite you to discover different design approaches, learn more about product strategy and development processes, and to meet diverse members of our global UX community. You can join us twice a month for deep dives featuring professionals and companies, and of course, for talent tracks that present up-and-coming UX designers. For more, follow us on LinkedIn, social media, or subscribe to our newsletter. But now, let me introduce today's award-winning product case study. So a little bit beforehand, of course, we all know that COVID hit us and the entire world unexpectedly. It still has a significant impact on our work life and on our social interactions. With a strategic design approach and with a close collaboration with scientists, the UX design team from SAP shaped the transition of the Corona Warn app from a pure contact tracing app in Germany to a fully functional pandemic app, which supports citizens in this country by organizing and protecting their day-to-day life during the pandemic. And the jury handed the Corona Warn app a product award in 2022 with the following statement. And I quote, "The Corona Warn app is a highly relevant product. It's designed for a totally new situation, which is continuously changing until today. This results in constantly shifting user requirements and a great amount of pressure. The app caters to the largest target group ever, basically everyone living in Germany. This ultimately complex design task produced a powerful, robust, and reliable service that helps all citizens to maintain a social life, keep connected in their private and professional lives, and navigate safely through this pandemic." And with this, I'm glad to introduce the key people behind this product. Anna-Maria Oechsner is a senior UX designer at SAP. Before joining SAP, Anna-Maria has been working at Volkswagen and IBM, and she's fascinated by human behavior and thoughtful design, and curious about new technologies and dedicated to lifelong learning. And the second person today is Martin Krauss. He is Director of Design at SAP and responsible for new ventures and technologies, as well as for strategic projects, such as the one we'll be talking about today. Martin built his career across UI design and interaction design before joining SAP in 2014. Here, he expanded his focus to UX design, working on healthcare projects, among many other fields. So Martin and Anna-Maria, a warm welcome to both of you, and the screen is yours. Please take it away from here.
Yeah, thank you for the great introduction. Happy to be here today. Yeah, as you already mentioned, it's Anna Maria and me from SAP, New Ventures and Technologies. Basically, this is the innovation unit of SAP. Yeah, I mean, basically the whole NVT team was, or part of the whole NVT team was already involved into the very, very early groundwork of the Corona One app when we basically started with that, especially in terms of software architecture and stuff. So rather the technical parts, and we later on joined actually to do the UX design work. Until that, a team from our headquarters in Waldorf has been basically the UX design work for the first releases, right? Yeah, and since then we are basically working on the Corona One app together in a team of 4 permanent UX designers, including me. And then also, yeah, during the high phases when we had to ship a lot of new functionality, we had 2 additional freelancers basically with us. Yeah. And I will basically start this and talk a little bit more about the context and the setup of the UX work on the Corona One app, right? And Anna Maria will later on tell us a little bit more, let's say, hands-on design work, and also a little bit more about the results, right? So to get started, when we stumbled into this project, so to say, yeah, it started off with a lot of phone calls, actually, a lot of Teams calls, so to say, right? And what I started also in parallel was collecting whom I was basically talking to, right? And then this kind of high-level stakeholder map was kind of created during work. And it just describes a little bit the situation we were in, so to say, right? To explain it a little bit, as you can see here, there is this UX design bubble and the end users. It's pretty obvious that we were like the team designing around the end user needs, and also trying to understand that and also bring it back into the loop of all the other stakeholders to communicate that, right? And then you can see this SAP bubble there on the right side. Yeah, this basically describes the whole product development, product design, and product management work track, so to say, that came from SAP, right? So we had like people from data protection. We have both like the iOS and the Android development teams within SAP, right? All the product owner, product management, architecture stuff, also within SAP. And yeah, of course, user assistants, user research colleagues also supported us very, very great with doing the user studies. Yeah, as well as accessibility was also covered from SAP and the community team, right? And then if you look at the greater stakeholder map, then it's pretty obvious that we had a lot of very, very tight collaboration with the Robert Koch Institute. Because these people are basically the experts in these topics, right? We worked with a team of lawyers to prepare things for the data protection office, so to say, and also, yeah, at some meetings here and there with the German Ministry of Health, and also, yeah, with the German Bundeskanzleramt. Yeah, so as you can see, a lot of stakeholders involved. I guess you all know that it was very, very, yeah, visible, this app in media everywhere and so on, and probably some of you are already also still using it, right? So I guess this gives you kind of an impression, and this is really just high level, naming kind of organizations around that were surrounding us during the project. Yeah, and with that, I basically want to continue a little bit more talking about how we set up design, right? So as I said, we came to the project, we were quite new. We had to rethink how we do things. For us, as a very small design team, actually, really. Yeah, so we came up with a kind of structure of, yeah, also meetings, basically formats where we exchange about design with ourselves, with others, with developers, with stakeholders, and so on, right? And what helped a lot and was pretty obvious to do was basically that we had a daily design check-in, right? This was definitely one of the core things that we were quite happy about. So every morning at 9 a.m. we had a phone call together and went through the upcoming topics, went through the progress, what happened yesterday, and what is yeah, on the page for today, so to say, right? This was really one of the core things, I would say. Then we had syncs with development teams on a weekly basis, right? One sync with the iOS development team, one sync with the Android development team to go through the concepts we are currently working on, right? But also to clarify open points on the current development, as you can imagine. Then, yeah, there's this Berlin round thing next here. This was basically a meeting also twice weekly where we met together with all the product managers, with the people from the Robert Koch Institute, some people from BMG, so the German Ministry of Health, and also from the Bundeskanzleramt joined there. So that was the kind of round where we basically discussed what should be like new in the app, where we also prioritized things, what should be like on top of the backlog. And this was also a regular, yeah, basically way to share our current design work to everyone, to every stakeholder, right? And we always were like in a kind of very agile mode there. And we never prepared anything just for the meetings. We really just shared always our design files as they are at the moment, right? Yeah, and on top of that, we established some kind of, yeah, co-design meetings. So we were all in home office, as you can imagine, and as you've been probably as well. So yeah, we set up meetings where we just got together, shared our current designs, talked about it, worked on the same file at the same time via Figma and so on, and had really like a very, very close design collaboration there. Sometimes, yeah, for hours, right? All right. To continue with a little bit of insights, what kind of tools have you been using? Probably the same as most people today, I would guess, but yeah, to also give a little bit insights about that, right? So we use Microsoft Teams, of course, a lot for all the communication, right? Constant video calling during during the day. Then we had Jira for the development backlog. Also something to say, we never had like a proper UX design backlog. So it was really just a daily meeting. And I had some kind of list in my notebook where I had like an overview of the upcoming topics, but there was never like a proper design backlog. It was really just like daily meetings, what's going on today, what's going on tomorrow. So yeah, then we used UserZoom as the testing tool for user testing. Yeah, basically we did a lot of studies with UserZoom. Yeah, qualitative user feedback, also as quantitative user feedback and click path metrics and stuff like that, right? And then one of the core things that I personally think saved us was actually Figma, to be honest. I mean, when we started the project, we originally decided that we will move the whole project to Figma because some of the colleagues of us were working with Sketch before, and then we said, okay, we were not like the power users of Figma before, but let's try, otherwise we have no chance. And then we basically translated all the files into Figma and then established a working process also together with the development folks where we just had one Figma file actually for everyone. And this is the file that you can see here on the right-hand side, right? And there, basically, you can see the iOS master and then the Android master. And then for all the new functionalities, we created subpages. And once we released them, we merged them into the master page, so to say. And yeah, Figma was basically the single source of truth of the Corona Warn app for everyone, all stakeholders. So the Figma file was shared with everyone, so everyone could see what we're doing while we were doing. And yeah, as you can imagine, the whole stakeholder list I've shown before, almost everyone on that stakeholder map had access to our Figma files and could see what we're currently working on. And this really helped a lot also to build some trust, to have transparency, to get early feedback from stakeholders. We have been working with lawyers, especially here, also really they were commenting on what kind of text changes we have to do and so on. So it was really like a great collaboration with everyone. Like the most transparent, large scale project I would say I ever did, right? Really cool. Yeah, then I tried to map out very, very high level what was the kind of design process. But as you can imagine, with all the feedback cycles and stuff, it would be like a crowded page if I put in everything. But in general, it was like a very classic thing, right? So what we did, I mean, we were working with an agile development team. So there was this delivery mode, as you can see on the bottom, right? So we had like 2-week sprints and then release. So everything for that needs to be prepared, quite a bunch of things, and make sure that all the backlog items for the developers are prepared properly, right? And then in parallel, we had like a product design discovery work track. Looks pretty organized here. Sometimes it was not so organized, but in general, what we did was like a lot of discussion around the problem space. What do we want to solve? How can we solve it? How do we bring it like to the point? There also the colleagues from Robert Koch Institute were really, really helpful to frame this. And once we had clarity there, we started with like the solution space, sketched out some first ideas, collected feedback from the stakeholders, and then yeah, also did user testing, upfront development most of the time. Yeah, this is the very high level thing, right? And as you can imagine, if you run this, I can assume that some of the people watching do the same thing, that you have like the Scrum mode and then a product discovery work track on parallel. Yeah, then you're basically always building upon what you have in the app already. And to be honest, this is something that sometimes it's a bit stressful, especially, you know, don't have like, if you think about development teams always get time for refactoring. As a designer, you always have to fight for this. So to say, right, if you just build bricks up to the next one, then at some point you probably recognize, oh, now we build a lot of things into the app. And then at some point, yeah, you have to rethink if the design is still the right one, right? And this is, this was a bit challenging actually. But we also found our way there. And with that, I want to hand over to Anna Maria, and she will tell us a little bit more about this and the functionality that we have added over time.
Yeah, so as Martin showed our process and the setup, let me go a bit into the features we added and so on. So basically, when we took over this project, it was in the spotlight of public attention. And yeah, but it had no clear roadmap or clear future because the pandemic situation kept changing all the time. But soon after we took over, basically a feature offensive was started. And yeah, framing the problem space in this ever-changing pandemic situation was quite challenging. But we had a lot of syncs with all the stakeholders and managed to kind of forecast yeah, upcoming challenges, especially the people from the Robert Koch Institute were really helpful there, and we had a lot of syncs. But we then made sure also to work closely with the Ministry of Health to make sure that there's a symbiosis between upcoming regulations and the Corona Warn App as a tool which will help the citizens to live through those regulations and supports them in their daily lives there. And here you can see some examples of features. So basically when the 7-day incidents became more important, we added statistics to the app. When everything opened up a bit, we added the check-in functionality, and when the vaccinations arrived, we provided the user with the ability to also store their digital European COVID certificates in the app. This is just a brief overview of some of the features. But basically what you can directly see is that this also kind of changed, transformed the Corona Warn App from this contact tracing and warning app to a fully fledged pandemic companion, which could support all the citizens in their daily lives. But all those features, of course, always came with tight deadlines. So we usually had 2 weeks from learning about the requirements until we had to hand over all the deliverables to the developers for them to start. And here you can see an overview of what kind of deliverables we had to deliver. So basically, we always created designs for iOS and for Android. Here now I only show screens, but of course we had full flows, right? So we always showed in Figma, when you click here, this happens, and the edge, like the cases, error cases, and so on. So yeah, those two designs, and then of course dark modes respectively for both of them, and graphical assets and App Store graphics, and sometimes even more like graphical stuff for the media. But basically, of course, we were also not the only ones with tight deadlines, right? So development had them as well, because all the features needed to be shipped as fast as possible so that the users could have them on their phones when they needed them. So we also from the design side had to then take a look, how do we prioritize and reduce the scope for the features to fit in this limited time frame, which was there for the developers. And all of this. So here you can see an overview. This is not showing all features, but you can see how the app grew over time. And I mean, a lot of features were added. The purpose was changed, as I described before, because of all the new features. There were lots of new usage scenarios. And as you can see here directly, the app just became more complex. And of course, in this 2-week time frame, we also fit in a user test to make sure what we deliver doesn't have any usability issues. And also, from those tests feedback, we got the feedback that the app became more complex. And that's why we decided to look into kind of a holistic redesign, what we could do there. So we took together all the feedback from the user testing, the feedback from the community, and so on, and went through everything and came up with 3 hypotheses where we thought those would make the biggest difference in the experience. And here you can see them. So our first hypothesis was that we have to simplify the QR code scanning experience. I will come into a bit more detail on this later on. Second was that we have to change the information architecture, restructure the app based on the new usage scenarios. And thirdly is some adjustments to the visual appearance. And with those hypotheses, we then went to the Ministry of Health and pitched them, and we actually got buy-in to proceed with a redesign. So we then went ahead and created the redesign and basically showed it again and got the budget to do then a big user study to validate it. So here you can see an example of what we did for hypothesis 1, the QR code scanning experience. On the left, the gray part is the how it was before the flows, and on the right you can see the redesign. So basically before we had lots of different entry points into the different flows, because we got now a lot of QR codes which you could use in the Corona Warn app. You could register your test, you could use a check-in, you could register your COVID certificates, and basically we had several entry points which would guide you in the flow, and then you would scan your respective document. But what we did, we consolidated all of those and placed the prominent universal scanner in the tab bar, which directly brings up the scanner, and then you just scan the QR code and they are automatically guided in the workflow you needed without any additional overhead from the user's side. Like this, we proceeded with all the hypotheses until we had a redesign. And then for the user testing, we basically did an A/B split test with 300 participants. So we tested the design beforehand versus the redesign. For the setup there, as Martin described before, we used user Zoom and then had Figma prototypes, which, because from user Zoom, you can then for the task jump into the Figma prototypes and then come back for the questionnaires and so on. And we basically built 2 really elaborate prototypes. One, basically the app as it was back then, and the other one for the redesign. And we made sure to include all possible paths in there, because in user Zoom, it's really nice that you can ask them contextual questions, right? So if the user landed on this screen, you can ask him, okay, why did you get here or whatever? And also we could in that way track how intuitive our design was, because we could see where the user clicked first. And yeah, now to the results from this. So basically, for this testing, the users had a whole scenario they had to work through, several tasks. And as you can see, so gray is always the design beforehand, green is the redesign. So first chart shows the success rate. And as you can see, we had significant improvements there throughout all the tasks the users had to do. But it was not only that they were more successful. If you look at the next chart, the processing time, they were also way faster. So basically the x-axis shows the time that was spent working, and you can see that for the redesign, the green is a lot, they took a lot less time to finish the tasks. And lastly is the first click. So did the user intuitively directly click on the first? And also there we saw a huge improvement. Of course, with those tests, like you have to take those numbers with a bit grain of salt, because sometimes when the user sees some new design, they want to explore and so on. But we definitely saw improvements throughout the board. And yeah, this was our biggest user study basically, but it was by far not the only one. As I described before, for every big new feature, especially when we had new interaction patterns or changed anything major, we made sure to also validate it. It depended a bit what we used there. So we had this quite elaborate studies as for the redesign sometimes, where we then could look through the click path and so on. Sometimes we also did a think aloud study to just gain some insights if there are any usability issues and so on. And of course, we also, especially for the bigger studies, made sure that we also demographically mirror the user group of the app. And yeah, all this work basically paid off. So here you can see our current download numbers. So it's 45 million for now. And as you can see on the first chart to the right, since we took over, we basically managed to double the downloads, all by organic growth, as we didn't have any more marketing campaigns like at the beginning of the app. But what is even more meaningful to us are the charts below. Basically, it's the sharing behavior. So the chart in the middle shows how many people registered a positive test result via the app. And like the most important number or most meaningful number for us basically is the last chart. It shows how many people then shared their positive test result and thereby allowed others to be warned if they have been in contact. So it's just great to see how those numbers came up, and it also shows that basically, the acceptance and trust grew from the public because they now had this app they could use in their daily lives. And from a design perspective, basically we managed to achieve this. I mean, Martin mentioned it before, by being fully transparent, like showing throughout the whole design process and collaborating really closely with the stakeholders, like involving everyone really early on. Sometimes, of course, it can get a bit uncomfortable when you have to show your really early draft designs to all these important stakeholders, but it really helped us to align everyone, so everyone had an understanding where, what the feature would be, where it was going, and to get the feedback early, so we had time to then iterate it also during the design. And but of course we didn't achieve all this only as the designers, right? So you saw the stakeholder map before. So there was this huge team. So people from all different roles, backgrounds, companies came together. And only as one big team, we managed to pull this off. And that's it from our presentation. Thanks a lot. And I guess we will come now to the questions.
Well, thanks so much to both of you. It was a quick ride through 2 very challenging years. If you wish to, you can turn off your presentation so we can look each other in the face. And there are several questions coming up, but I wanted just a little bit to frame it beforehand, because I think it's such a complex project. And also there is one other issue that we didn't talk at all about. maybe because it wasn't part of the design work, but I think it's still interesting. There was also a question from Myram Ben Salem, actually. How did you collect the data? And I would like to push this a little bit into one element. It's actually the technology behind the app, the data infection tracking. It's open source, and it's quite a new technology, right? Would you any few words about this? What's in the engine room behind the design?
I mean, the question is, what kind of data are we talking about? What we are tracking? So if you're talking about user behaviors and stuff like that, in the very beginning, it was the decision that there will be no tracking at all implemented into the Corona Warn app. Then later on, during the data donation functionality, we added some, but this is also still not a full picture, so it's not really reliable about, yeah. And then for us, most of the data that we collected for our really UX design work was gathered actually through prototypes online in user studies. So we did some of them actually on quite high scale, like the one that Anna Maria presented with 300 users. And this gives you already a good impression of what you're doing there.
And there is a very big part which is open source behind the app, right?
Yes.
But that's the tracking technology which was developed beforehand. Is that correct?
I don't get the point with the tracking technology and the open source.
I mean, how the data was collected and shared between, I think, the devices, right?
Are we now talking about the test results, or?
Well, there was a part which is an open source technology about the app. I was told, so I was keen to know a little bit what that is about.
Okay, so I think what you mean is basically the Bluetooth tracing functionality that is exchanging which kind of mobile phone is next to you, and this is kind of a part that Apple and Google developed themselves and basically provides them through the operating system of Android and iOS, right? And this is used in all tracing apps across the world, actually, right? And yeah, besides that, the Corona Warn app is like fully open source. You can just download the source code, right?
You can also check out the coronawarn.app website. There you can also find all the infos and links to the repositories and so on.
Right. So back to the context and the setup of the project when you started it. I'm keen to know, I know it was done in short time and you jumped into something that was already going, but was there an initial briefing for your work and who defined it? And maybe were there any KPIs that you had to work about?
So basically the feature requirements, they came up ad hoc. So we didn't have like, okay, this is now planned and we need designers for that. They just knew they needed support. And then during the changing situation of the pandemic, features popped, like requirements came up then.
So no clear briefing, no clear structure. You had to basically jump into it and work.
Yeah, I mean, there was no clear design briefing. That's true, right? I mean, we were always involved into the discussion from the early beginning when we started discussing new functionality, right? Also together with people from Robert Koch Institute, or basically sometimes from German Ministry of Health, and also with our product managers and project managers from SAP, right?
Right. And we talked a little bit beforehand when we first met, and I think this is still interesting when you're talking about so many stakeholders you had to do, you had to work with. So I'm keen to know, because we're talking about UX, how did you create an understanding about the user-centered process, that it's actually important and you need to follow this? Any arguments, persuasion, any tricks?
I think, yeah, it's the trust we built over the time. Then it showed that when we validate things and we find then issues, because I mean, a lot of times because of the short time frame, sometimes we did the user testing, found then issues while development was in progress, and we had to kind of somehow put them in there as well. But it just showed that, yeah, it helped to to be proactive in that way, because we didn't really get a lot of feedback where we then afterwards, after it was released, had to fully change something. I mean, I think it's just a trust we built that way, that people also saw the value in testing beforehand and making adjustments, because that way you can afterwards save a lot of time in re-implementing some stuff when you notice it doesn't work.
So you'd say it grew basically in the process.
Yeah, but what we also can say about it is that it helped a lot to basically run the user studies, actually, especially the online user studies, where we had like proper click measuring and could in the end say, look, we have a split test. This is result A against result B. Right, with that kind of numbers, you can basically convince people pretty well. And I mean, it's then in the end the truth, right? That's like a good way for helping people making decisions.
Yeah, and as Martin said, lots of people didn't have close contact with designers before, right? Because it was this diverse stakeholder around, but the data, everyone can directly understand where we are coming from.
Right. So this is where the data comes into play, where you basically put the facts behind what you show. And actually, there was a question from Saravana Kumar, which I think adds nicely to this, and he wrote or he asked about the scale of user insights. What was the scale of the user insights that you had? Did you start ideation with prototype personas initially, or how did you start to work towards framing maybe user scenarios? Can you comment on this?
Yeah, I mean, since we have this very broad user group, right? We looked into using personas, but we more than based it on the user journeys, right? For example, the check-in functionality. There are also a lot of stuff comes into play. There is a poster you have to print out and hang somewhere. Then you have to use the app to check in and so on. And then later you can be warned because of this check-in. So we used a very journey-based approach, I would say, and not so much persona-based.
So was it the same on the use cases that you, when you develop different use cases along with a process where it added on with different functionalities?
Yeah, I mean, there we didn't like, basically, usually there came a feature request and then we didn't know the full scope yet, right? So for example, the statistics, when we added them, it were four statistics we needed to show. And then over time, you know, they say, okay, we need now this number as well, and we need this number, and we need this numbers. So we tried to make it always, or we learned to make it always really scalable, because you don't know what else will need to be added in the feature itself. Same goes for the certificates, right? Like there's not only the vaccination certificate, there's a recovery certificate, there's a test certificate. And now we have all these additional options like checking it for travel validity and so on. So we learned quickly to make it as scalable as possible, because this in the end helps us a lot in the design, and we don't have to, because of the tight time frames, we usually couldn't just do a redesign of the whole feature, but then had to build on top of it. So yeah.
Right. I was actually, from my personal point of view, because I'm also a user. Let's go into these stupid questions that people would probably ask you when they have the chance to, and I have now, so I will do so. And this is also about use cases. For instance, how did you decide on placing the scanning at the center of the UX? For instance, as opposed to certificates, when you have to enter a place and you have to show it, and maybe that's the biggest button you want to choose. It's different. I mean, like probably it's there's both scenarios, but how did you decide this is the more important one?
It's hard to decide which is more important, actually, right? Because in the end, we came up with really tons of design approaches on how to tackle that, actually, right? We explored so much there, and it was in the end also a hard discussion with everyone along, data protection and so on, right? Some part of the structure came actually from legal aspects, to be very honest, right? So otherwise we had also different approaches where we would say, this might have been, I don't know if it's necessarily better, but at least we had designs where we felt more comfortable about. But at some point, sometimes they have to make also decisions to stay legal with what you're doing, right? And maybe to answer the questions with the central scanning functionality, this was really something we came up with when we did user testings based on the features we have added over time, right? And then over time we recognized, oh well, something's going wrong because people are clicking the wrong button to scan the document that they actually want to scan, right? And then we said, all right, this is getting more, we should do something. And then we came up with basically with the central scanning functionality and said, oh, let's combine the scanners in this central thing and provide it that way that they don't necessarily need to know what they're scanning, right?
And we also, maybe also from a design perspective, we always try to make sure to stick to the guidelines as close as possible. So the iOS guidelines and the Android guidelines respectively, because of this broad user group, if we stick to the standard components and so on, then people who have the phone, they know how it works, or they should know how it works. And then we also just look at other prominent apps, how they are handling some of their main action functionality and so on. And like that it evolved.
Yeah, so it comes back to basically also relying on hard fact that that there are design rules, there are UX rules, there is apps, or let's say workflows that you basically know they work and use them. So maybe that answers a little bit, or leads into the question that I just got from Harshit, and he said, well, where did you actually get the user research from when this pandemic was the first one after almost 90 years? So there is basically no user data, right?
True.
But on the other hand, I guess you are talking about very basic usage, let's say, flows, right? And not something that maybe is, it's in the case of a pandemic, but on the other hand, it just has to work on certain steps and requirements for certain situations, and it becomes quite simple. Is that true, or is this just a provoking statement?
I didn't get the point with what is becoming simple, actually.
Well, that actually the design that you, in the end, that you create is something that remains simple and has to be simple. And even if there is no basic user data coming from, let's say, 90 years, which on apps we probably don't have anyway, you can make it work in any situation.
Yeah, I mean, you can also, sometimes in the design process, we came up with some fancy designs, but we always then had to move them away, because it was just, we stick to the standard patterns because everyone knows it from all other apps, and then everyone should be able to use them. And having some, hidden features, or I don't know, not everyone is so familiar with all the functionalities of the phone. So, yeah. Sticking to the standards.
Peter, you're here, right, in the Zoom call, actually. Would you mind asking your question live by yourself? Because I think it's a very good one. And maybe there is an opportunity for a conversation. Otherwise, I'll just read it. So Peter Sean says, in the beginning, there was a lot of distrust against the app, especially around the Bluetooth tracking. Of course, we're in Germany. Also, we were very skeptical about data sharing. Many thought it might enable accurate location tracking of the app users. So did you consider this skepticism when designing the app? And how does the design clear up these concerns and enables a transparent communication?
Yeah, I mean, this is a question that primarily goes to the team that was working on the initial release, to be honest, right? So from what we know, is that team also did a lot of user research in the very beginning, and they really took a lot of care of communicating as proper as possible, right? This is also why the app has like this onboarding process where it's described very, very directly and as good as possible, right? This was also tested. And this helped a lot. And then also, if you look what paid into that is that it's actually an open source app, right? And if you look at the press, all the people that are into data security, even the Chaos Computer Club gives us positive feedback about what we're doing there, right? So this, I think, also helped a lot about having a good reputation of this app, right? I think if we would have done things different, then the adoption would not have been that high.
And we also made sure in upcoming features, like for example, the check-in functionality and so on, to also communicate clearly to the user that this is, that this check-in doesn't track the person's location and doesn't send the location somewhere, or because it's like, just with every feature, also keep in mind you have to communicate.
Mm-hmm. So it's more about really messaging, communicating towards users through the app about new releases, new functions, and explaining them in a simple and transparent manner. And of course, communication around the product probably helped a lot, because there was a lot, I remember.
Yeah, and I mean, we also, like Martin showed in the stakeholder map, we have this whole community team, right? They monitor like all the feedback the community is giving and so on. And there's also a technical hotline, like also through those channels, we actually got quite some user feedback, right? Because if people call the technical hotline and the issue comes up again and again, then we would also get to know about this and so on.
Right. There is a question from Harshit Verma, and he actually wrote or asked where did you do any dummy apps to start to get feedback or user research without risking the real app name or the final app beforehand?
No.
We didn't know.
I mean,
there was no time.
I mean, this also goes to the very beginning of the very initial app, right? I know that a lot of user research happened there, and this also the colleagues did user research in the lab as well in the very beginning, right? Lab testing and so on. And I can imagine that there were prototypes without having a logo at that time, but it was probably rather because there was no logo in the beginning. But yeah, I mean, right? And this was also very, not a very public thing. I mean, when we took over, the app was already released, right? And we also had the chance to just do public user testing without asking anyone, like, right?
We always communicated, right? The regular stuff you communicate in the testing, that this is just a prototype and so on. And but actually it was helpful to do it with the real app, so to say, because then we could get comments from the users, like for example, this check-in I mentioned, that they were concerned because of the data, or they have concerns because of this functionality and so on. And we wouldn't have gotten this if we had just used the dummy app, I guess. And then we could adjust accordingly to help.
So in the end, you had basically to run with the progress and to run with the usage and continue making it better and adding on, right? So because this was a complex process, I'm wondering, when you look back at it after 2 years, what was the biggest challenge for you in the development process? Is there one thing you can say?
Like this adding on top and so on, features have to be added with a minimum, have to be added very quickly. And in the beginning, we didn't design everything as scalable as we then later learned to. So later we were way more prepared. If someone came with a new requirement for an existing features, we had it already, had a place for it. That was a learning process, I would say.
So did you develop a kind of system or a repository where additional features could be added?
Yeah, I mean, we have the master file as our system, but we just use then scalable patterns, right? So that, yeah, for example, in the vaccination certificates, you can see we have several different informations there, and you could add some more if you would need to, without it breaking the layout and so on.
Right, and this adds on to what Dario asked. He's a UX designer, and he wrote he asked whether you actually also built a design system. Was this a part of the project?
Mm-hmm. Yes, we built a design system and we enhanced it, and yes, to keep it short. Actually, yeah, basically also 2 adaptations of it, like, yeah. I mean, basically, we have a system around the app, one for iOS, of course, right? And this is in light mode and in dark mode, and then the same for Android as well. Yeah.
Because it also helps to keep the app consistent, and keeping the app consistent helps the users to know what they are doing.
Right. Is this part of a toolkit that developers can access? Is this something around that?
No, we didn't publish it.
But of course, like, it contains also the standard components the developers anyways can access. So,
right. And in terms of UX, when you look back at the iterations and the growth of the product and the different stages, what would you say in retrospective were the biggest advances really in terms of usage that happened in the app?
The biggest advantage or advances?
Well, that's a good question, right? I mean, from the point of, it depends on the point of view, right? If it's from which stakeholder or the user, but let's stick with UX. So what was for, let's say, the end user, the biggest advance, let's say, in making the UX better?
In making the UX better, I mean, yeah, this is it's a challenging question, right? Because we added functionality, which always is like an improvement in terms of functionality. And then we made some design shifts in the end that really helped to make things more understandable and faster, right? And it's quite obvious. I mean, the thing that made things probably more efficient for end users was just making this central scanning functionality as an example. Right, but if we talk about the core value of it, I mean, then on the one hand side, you have the tracing functionality, right? You have the check-in functionality that helps you to actually get informed that you might infect it, right? So, and then you can also, you know, it's about breaking the infection chains in the end, right? And this is the core benefit of the app still, while, yeah, I mean, also having, the vaccination certificate with you. You can probably remember how it was like half a year ago when you wanted to go somewhere, even if it was just IKEA actually, then you were quite happy that you have the certificate in your pocket and you could always also do the check-in in the restaurant and so on. Yeah.
Right, you can even add certificates of your family members. So it's really helpful when you have kids, as we do, for instance. Yeah, I find that very neat. Or your older mother who doesn't want to use a smartphone too. So, any break or make moments at the development where you said it was, wow, that thing could have crashed at that moment? And how did you overcome it?
I don't know if we had such a break moment, as we try to, you know, always be very, yeah, we had our user testing to back things up. Like, of course, in the early iteration process, right? We sat together and said, okay, this doesn't work, this is a bad idea. But then we incorporated stakeholders and the feedback and the testing. Yeah, of course, with every release, you get excited or nervous, and then you look into the App Store comments, and yeah, quite a lot of comments and different.
And you watch the media reactions, of course,
yeah.
But yeah, not really such a moment.
Does it make you feel different in such a big and such a public project to work there as a designer? And because probably you worked in many other projects as well that were not as public at all, and not as hyped at all, and not as risky at all. And now you're standing at the forefront, basically, and everybody is, yes, heaping positive or negative remarks on you, and you're going to bed in the evening and saying like, oof.
I think, yeah, this is definitely special, right? As even if we, I mean, Anna Maria described a lot that we really had very tight schedules, right? Once we have like a clarity on what we actually design until we designed it, and then often in media, also just mock-ups have been shown up front, right? When we were still developing things, and we, I don't know, I remember the, yeah, vaccination certificate that was in media just a few days after we kind of felt okay with the design, but we were not really sure, right? And oh, it's now it's in the Tagesschau. Interesting. Yeah, but you get used to it, kind of, right? And on the other side, what helped me a lot was really knowing that we have like a really good backing from a very, very cool development organization, actually, to be honest, right? And we were really just, I mean, it was such an agile project, and every time we had problems, we just discussed them and we solved them. And if we would run into trouble, then, you know, okay, if there's trouble, then we will do our best to fix it, right? And then just a few days later, we would basically just fix it. And we're really relying on our colleagues there, also from the development and product management, right? So this was like, for me, very helpful to know that we have that kind of backing behind us.
Yeah, and also the other stakeholders, right? We had really open communication always with Robert Koch Institute and so on. So this was, yeah, it was just a great collaboration with also with all this, yeah, public sector.
And in terms of your own team, your very small design team of 4 people, did you develop something like a procedure or something to keep up your motivation and a positive feeling through such a challenging time?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me at least, the work was also really rewarding, right? To see how people shared their positive test results, and then they got in, like someone was warned and therefore stayed home and didn't, and like to have this really valuable, yeah, real value bringing to the community. I would say this was really rewarding.
Mm. Yeah, and for me, I think working with the team, I mean, we actually have never been working together before. We just stumbled all together into that project as our first project together. We didn't even know each other before, right? And yeah, but we kind of kept the climate in the team that we can be really open and honest about everything, right? And so, I mean, we're also all senior designers in this group of 4, so to say. And we, yeah, it's always important to keep some humor in the room, right? And to be just super honest if you think about something critical, because if you think about that, there are thousands of people out there that think the same, right? And this helps a lot in really, you know, especially having these long design sessions often in the afternoon or during the day. We were just putting our heads together and we're just totally, sometimes very bitterly honest to each other, right? I mean,
but it helps, right? So someone telling you, okay, this is a shitty idea, then, you know, we can move on and we can explore something new. So this openness, and you don't have to think twice, okay, how do I communicate this now in a polite way so nobody is hurt? Nobody of us cared about that.
That's a great statement, like to keep everybody on one level and to be very open and not feel bad about any kind of criticism. And it speaks also a little bit to what you mentioned beforehand, that also it helped you a lot with all the stakeholders to be as transparent as possible, and probably also to argue about based on facts also and findings. Actually, Hamed wrote and asked if your best learning or biggest learning in the project was, maybe from a design point of view.
For me, it would be this full transparency, right? Not caring anymore, because we were in Figma, as Martin said, the file was shared with everyone. Sometimes you worked on this new concept and then you could see 10 cursors floating around you who were just interested what was coming up while you were just exploring and not even, I mean, you know the process. In the beginning, it's not nice what you do all the time. So, but it helped, it paid off so immensely. This full transparency, just showing it directly to everyone, even in the early stages.
Martin, you're nodding and smiling under your
I have nothing to add.
beard.
I think that worked out pretty well, right? Having this transparency there. And besides that, I guess it was special, of course, having all the stakeholder management around. But besides that, it was just a regular agile development project, right?
Right. So Peter actually had a question that leads a little bit to the end. Although we won't let you leave so quickly. So he wrote, since the pandemic isn't over yet and the app still receives updates, and it probably will, are there any elements of the app you would like to change from a design perspective? So this is a bit more retrospective already, reflective already.
Yeah, I mean, there's some new functionality also coming in from a design perspective. Of course, there are things that could be improved and so on, but I wouldn't say we have any major concerns at the moment.
Good. Seems that you're happy. And if you look back now, of course, this is hypothetical, reflective. If you had a full requirements briefing from the start, things would go, in a more, say, classical way. Would you set up a different process or work approach, or would you say no, it was quite well the way it went?
I think.
Or what would you change?
Yeah, I think I shared a little bit about really having you have like the product development basic kind of work track where you really have to deliver like the proper design for implementation on the one hand side. And then you have like the discovery track on top of this running, right? Where you really explore new functionality, basically iteratively, and also doing like testing, conversation stuff. But yeah, as I said, if you're really just building one brick to the next, then at some point you feel like, oh, this is not really scaling. Now we're running into trouble, right? And this is something that I usually try to avoid with having like something. Yeah, I think I wouldn't change so much on the design process in general, right? But if you now say, okay, if you know the requirements better from the beginning, then I would rather assume that we would like, I don't know, let's go to the basement, have like a 2-week sprint, design sprint, craft a vision of it, and we know better what kind of interaction problems we're running into in the end, right? This is definitely something that I would have done different, but yeah.
Also, what one has to remember, right? Even if we had known all the features beforehand, there are some requirements like legally and so on that wouldn't change anyways, right?
So we also know that for privacy reasons, there is absolutely no tracking of user data in the app. And that, of course, doesn't allow you to use data in terms of seeing how the app is used and also deciding maybe about changes in the UX and design. But I'm wondering what would change in terms of UX design development if you could track and evaluate user data. Would you be able to design in a different way?
I mean, we have a framework already to put like how we work to get the user feedback in. It's just now not gathered by the tracking, but by testing results, by the community, by the hotline. I mean, everyone has a lot to say about this app. So we have this framework how to put in the feedback, and I guess we could scale it then as well to also incorporate other data.
So is there anything you can share with us, because we're all using the app still and we're so keen to know about, will there be a continuation for this project? What will come next? And actually there was a question from Saravana Kumar. Is there maybe a roadmap for a global scale since it's open source and beyond Germany as well, other application fields? That's many questions in one, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah, and we cannot really answer or say something to that. So keep an eye out for the news, I guess. Then, like this doesn't mean that there are any news coming, but you like if something is coming, you will hear about it.
It will jump in our face. So my last questions to you would be to wrap this up. What's the biggest flop to you? The one thing that you can't hear anymore in relation to the Corona app?
When you say you work on the Corona One app, what sometimes it gets people to go into some political discussions, or when you stand in line to show your vaccination certificate, then also some people have very angry opinions and then project them on the app. So yeah, that was special about the project, I guess.
Right. So let's not go into politics. Thanks a lot, Martin and Anna Maria, and all you out there who are in Germany. Please use this little thing because it can really help you and everybody around you as well. So thank you to both of you very much for this talk and this insight. It was a lot of fun. I hope you enjoyed it too.
Thank you.
And good luck for your next steps and, of course, the next projects. And thanks to everyone for joining us today. You can check out the awards website, of course, about, as I said, our call for entries, about great UX projects that are there from all the award years until now. And feel free to jump on to the competition and still submit something new you're working on until the end of May. So thanks a lot for being with us here again, and see you soon in one of our next events. Stay healthy, stay well. Bye-bye.